few people are still joining, and that's fine. I think we'll we'll go ahead and get started because I want to dispense with some of that housekeeping and things first. So first of all, I just thank you so much, all of you, for joining. Really appreciate having so many people here to sort of participate in this, what we call our Daughterhood Conversations. The topic for today, as you know, is navigating home care for your parents. This is a really meaty topic, and one that I know is incredibly relevant to so many of you and to caregivers in general. So let me just start by saying that just a heads up that this is being recorded. So the good news is that you can listen to it on YouTube, and we'll make it available. We'll send around the recording. So don't worry, you will get that when we get it all edited and ready to go. And if this is your first time to a Daughterhood event or to the website, just giving you a little bit of a sense of who we are. We are a community that I like to say provides a place to go for caregivers. We have a Daughterhood Circle program, which is really the that and our podcast and our blog are kind of the key services that we provide, I guess you could say. And the Daughterhood Circle program is a peer support program that helps caregivers navigate challenges of providing care, working with family members, finding and arranging services. And so if you are not part of the Circle program, if you're interested in learning more about it, signing up to be part of one or to lead one, just go to the Circles tab on our website, which is at daughterhood.org. I would be remiss if I didn't also give a big shout out to our podcast, Daughterhood, the podcast, led by Roseanne Corcoran. She's phenomenal and is really she's growing her audience every day and has so many interesting speakers. So please check that out as well. And also you can find that on our website, iTunes. Okay. So what we're doing today is part of our Daughterhood Conversation series, which is the circle leaders. So the individuals who have founded and started circles in their communities, we have a circle leader call that we convene like once a quarter. And we have so many interesting conversations among ourselves when we're on that call. And, we talk about kind of everything that happens in caregiving. We talk about the larger, policy environment. And we thought to ourselves, wouldn't it be cool? Like, shouldn't we try to have some of these conversations in a more public way so that other members of our community can have the opportunity to also be part of that conversation. So the way we've structured these is to bring our Daughterhood Circle leaders into individually, one or two at a time, and have a conversation based on their areas of expertise. So, and then invite you to pose questions in the chat. So we're not going to have we're going to talk amongst ourselves, and then we would take your questions in the chat function. So that's kind of how it works. Today, we are so lucky because we have two people who are really unique and special to have a conversation with, because they are both owners and operators of top-notch, amazing home care companies that deliver and provide home care services. And they are also deeply involved in caregiver advocacy and support. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of each of them and then encourage you to read their bios when you get a chance, which will be on the website with the recording. So Christine Lee is the founder and CEO of Casa Companion Home Care Solutions, which is an agency that provides in-home care in San Diego, California. So if you're in San Diego, you are in luck. She's got a ton of other qualifications, certified senior advisor, and she really, we have the Daughterhood Circle program in large part because of her leadership. In 2015, she and her co-founder came to me and said, we need to bring this to the local level. And they founded the first Daughterhood Circle in San Diego, and now mentor a lot of our other circle leaders and have a really robust community there. So Christine is the person I go to, always has all of the amazing ideas. So I actually think the conversations, Christine, is something that was your idea. And then sort of just super excited also to introduce to you Andrea Cohen, who and I joke because like Andrea is somebody I heard about when I was starting Daughterhood, because people who knew what I was trying to do would say to me, you've got to meet Andrea Cohen. You've got to see what she's doing. She's got something really special going on. And she had basically founded one of the most sort of innovative home care companies in the country called Houseworks. I think it's probably one of the largest independent private home care companies in the country. And has been doing that for a while. And sort of in addition to that, has sat on the board of the Home Care Association of America. So she's very familiar with this sort of industry in general, and also serves on the board of the Caregiver Action Network, which I am also on the board of, and that's how I got to know her. So two fabulous people and two great resources on home care. So, definitely tee up all of your questions. So, because we're going to have a great conversation today. Let me just pause for a quick moment and just make sure, do we have everybody in who is Susan? I don't think we have anybody else in the waiting room, do we? Nope. I think we can move off of the slide deck now and go back to our, yay. Okay. All right, I'm going to go to speaker view. So thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. So funny because we talk about, trying to recreate the spirit of the conversations that we have in our Daughterhood Circle leader meetings. And then we get on these calls and there's, 40 people on the call and it's being recorded. And then I start to feel kind of nervous. So I just want to put that out there. Having said that, I do want to just say that, it's so important that we're doing this, because one of the questions that we get the most through the website is about home care. And there's so many different kinds of questions that we get. And I think one of the first ones that I wanted to hit on or touch on today with you all is how, we hear from caregivers all the time. It's sort of like, how do I know when is the right time to try to bring home care services to my loved one, to my parent, whoever it is I'm taking care of? A parent might be living far away. Like how do you know? We'll get to how you persuade the person to accept the services, but just starting with like, what are some signs that maybe your person that you're caring for, your family member, would benefit from services? I mean, how do you advise your friends and family about when to seek out services? And maybe Christine, do you mind just kicking off and sharing your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, of course. Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Christine Lee, and I think the first step is just to try to kind of take note of where you are in the process. So are you in crisis? Did a crisis just happen? Did your mom or your dad or whoever it is that you're caring for, did they just have a fall and have a broken hip and now are in the hospital, and you get a call from the hospital discharge planner like, okay, your mom's getting discharged in 2 hours. Is that where you are? Are you in that type of, because that does happen. Or is it that you are not in crisis, but you're also planning ahead? Are you trying to be preventative in certain things? Like you're starting to notice maybe in your last visit that there were just some things that seemed off, and it's just like, maybe it's time to start thinking ahead of this. So you're not in a crisis mode. Right. So I think that's kind of like the first thing. Unfortunately, I mean, we do see a lot of, as Anne mentioned, I am a Daughterhood Circle leader in San Diego, and we see a lot of crisis that happens all the time. So obviously the preference would be, to start planning ahead. I mean, that's really the better option, rather than having to go through this in crisis mode. Right. But I mean, so first step is just like, where are you right now?
Right. Exactly. Well, and I just like maybe I should take a step back even and ask Andrea, maybe how do you even describe what home care is as a service and what it's supposed to do? So to Christine's point, like you're in crisis, people get really confused, right? There, because the Medicare program has a home health benefit, and we're talking about home care. And I think, especially when you're in crisis, just sorting through all of that and figuring out, well, like, what's the difference and what is home care? And, you know, um, I think that's a like fundamental key
Yeah.
piece of understanding that people don't have.
Yeah, that's a good question because, like as you said, there's home care, there's home health care, there's in-home care. Depends on, the time of day is what you call it. So I think the way I describe it, the kind of home care that Christine and I really operate are, it's I usually explain it as when you get out of the hospital or out of a rehab, you're entitled to certain services through your insurance, whether it be Medicare or, whatever kinds of insurance you have. And what home care does, the kind that we are operating, it sort of wraps around what you get over it, because so many people, there's a gap between what you might get through your insurance and what you actually need. And that's what home care does. And when there's a lot of complexity of care, we meaning a houseworks type of home care or a private home care company would really work in side by side with the certified home care company to make sure that we don't duplicate services and that you're working seamlessly. And I'm jumping ahead to that question you're going to ask about how do you vet a home care company, but one of the questions could be like, are you in touch with the certified home care company that I'm also getting? Like you want to make sure that sort of you're communicating. So, but going back to your original question, it's really about what kinds of services do you need that are over and above. And a lot of times I try to explain to people that Medicare will cover services through home care services until it gets to a point where the person has reached what we call their baseline. So when they can't get any better, when Medicare home care can't say there's going to be more improvement, then that's when they sort of drop out, and then we even go in more. So a lot of people who might have chronic care needs where there's not the ability to just increase your baseline and get better and better, but you're basically living at your new normal, that's what we do. And we try to figure out ways to just and you can to help people live productive, wonderful lives, whether they've switched and they can't do as much, or they might be able to do a little bit more. That's our job.
I'm muted. There we go. No, thanks. I mean, basic, like I always try to, this is such a hard thing for a lot of people to understand, but Medicare is ultimately a health insurance program, right? It's a medical. And there are things that it will pay for that are what we kind of call like non-medical support services, but it doesn't do that very much at all. It does a little bit through the home health benefit and a little bit here and a little bit there. But, people are always sort of surprised they get to this point and they realize, something happens, a crisis happens, and then they realize, oh my gosh, how's my mother going to get bathed every day? How's she going to get fed? Who's going to supervise if the person has cognitive impairment or dementia? And like, how am I going to do my job while all those things are being done? And those personal care services are the like that daily support that the direct care workers do that are part of your agency. Like that's not covered by Medicare. It's covered by Medicaid, but and that's a whole other ball of wax. But but for the most part, people pay privately or they just do that work themselves. And so like yeah. So I think one of the misconceptions is that I think among caregivers and older adults is that you're either getting these services at home in your traditional family home, or you're choosing a facility. Like you're choosing to go to an assisted living facility or an independent living facility. And I think that, I think it's important for people to understand that that's not necessarily an either or. And that, I mean, Andrea, I know that you at Houseworks, you all do a lot of work actually with people who live in assisted living. And
Right,
you just describe
right.
how that works. I think that's always surprising to people.
Yeah, sure. And I am going to correct you, and we're going to call assisted living and independent senior housing residences versus facilities.
Thank you. Yes.
Because it's
I, you know what,
confusing.
I said that and
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
uh-oh, like that's
yeah.
not, we need, like the nursing homes are facilities.
Right,
These
right.
are
Skilled
like,
nursing facilities. Yeah.
right. These are,
No, but it's all in the language. So,
yeah, exactly.
anyway, so yeah, I mean, a lot of people who move into senior housing need, whether it be in an independent senior housing, you're basically getting someone at the front desk and maybe a good emergency call system, but no staff that are dedicated to supporting your healthcare needs unless it's sort of an add-on. And in an assisted living, you get a certain amount of service, but it's, generally as people age in place, they need more than what the senior housing residents or the independent living can provide. So companies like mine and Christine's might be called upon by either the resident and the family themselves, or even the senior living resident care director saying, this resident needs extra care. And again, if you're looking, if you're looking at senior housing, one of the first questions you would ask is, what are the kinds of accommodations that can support my parent as they age in place? And what kinds of relationships do you have with home care companies? Because the key to getting great service in senior housing is that there's, again, a really good relationship between the home care company and the senior housing residents. Because when we go into senior housing, we sort of feel like we're in somebody else's house, two houses. We're both in the resident's house and the house of, and the senior living. So we're communicating with everybody, because that's, and you're just going to keep hearing that from us over and over again, is how well are you communicating during these transitions? And honestly, that's a good home care company, that people that communicate. I don't know, Christine, what do you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The communication piece is critical. I do want to add, I think from something that'll probably be interesting for the people on this call, if you are considering assisted living, is that I think where people are very shocked by is that, let's just say you feel, if either for safety or for financial reasons, whatever reason it is that you decide to move into senior housing, right? I know this has come up with a lot of our clients. It's like maybe they move their parent into memory care, and then they get a phone call from the senior housing community, and they were like, "Oh, your mom actually needs, more care than we're able to provide." So then they have to hire privately. So either bring us in, like another home care agency, and so then that's an additional cost, right? That they weren't prepared for. So at the end of the day, I mean, just for everybody on this call, I know that's something that I think a lot of caregivers don't even think about that. It's like, oh, they move their parents, they're going to be fine. But then a lot of times, you just have to think that not all communities are going to, they're one resident of many in a community, right? It's not one-on-one anymore. And it very well could come to the point where they're going to need additional one-on-one care. So just think about that. And that is a great question. That's one of the, Andrea already mentioned that, some good questions to ask. That is another one. It's just like, okay, so what is the process? After we move in, what's going to be the process for when my loved one needs additional care? Do you provide that? Do you partner with a home care agency? Am I going to be required to find that myself? What's the process?
That's right. And I just have to add to that, because I totally agree. The other thing you have to think about, and a lot of you on the call have probably heard, and there's, what's a continuing care retirement community, and what's the difference between that and senior housing. But basically in continuing care retirement community, in theory, you're supposed to move from independent to assisted to a skilled nursing facility, and it's all on the same campus. So one of the other questions you would ask is, how is that transition managed? Can you actually get services in the independent 24/7, or do you need to move along the continuum? Because if you don't ask, you're not going to know what the answer is. And if you ask, you have to then, really, that's where you find that person who can do the Excel spreadsheet and, come up with cost estimates if blank, blank, blank. And then a lot of times one spouse needs independent and the other might need memory. So there's just a whole lot of different ways that you have to think about it. But again, like with any product, especially one that's as expensive as home care, you need to be a good consumer. You need to ask questions. It's okay to ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, lots of people are pinning a lot of hopes on home care now, right? Because of COVID, concerns about being in more congregate care settings or whatever, or just, I think the independence of a lot of the, older adults coming along today is, I'm going to stay in like my mom's friend and my mother and my mother's, we're having these conversations about CCRCs now, and she's in her 80s. And, after having been a very heavy duty caregiver for the last year and a half for my dad, and she, a couple of her friends are like, I will never move anywhere. I'm going to stay in my home. I'm going to stay in my home forever. And, this gets to we're still on the when to get home care. I mean, your services are also, home care services are also designed to help people stay at home as long as possible. And that's, I guess, depending on a wide variety of circumstances, there's a long way you can go with that, right? Before things deteriorate to a point where it just no longer works. But, you both probably have supported lots and lots of people with very high levels of need at home. And I'm just curious, what is that, what do you typically see? I mean, Christine, what are some of the more clients that you had where, you've had them for some period of time and you've been able to help them stay at home? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I think it takes a team of individuals, right? You're not working in a silo. I mean, it's a full-on team. So you're working with, one of the things, immediately I think of safety. So what is it going to take to safely keep somebody at home?
Right.
And so what type of equipment is needed, right? And so that's, so we, for example, with our home care agency, we then have a partnership with a durable medical equipment, store and supplier where we refer pretty much all of our clients because we need to make sure that they have the right equipment in place to even stay at home, and so, a good home care agency is going to have these types of partnerships in your local community to be able to refer you to all of the services that are going to be needed, because it goes into so many different directions. It's not just home care. Again, there's a safety piece, and then there's the financial piece. There's the elder law attorney or the estate planning attorney. There's so many different professionals that are going to be involved when caring for somebody that's aging or disabled. And so it's a group effort, it's a team effort, and you need to tap into all of those resources in order to keep somebody at home for that long.
And to tag
the piece that's so intimidating too, to the caregiver. So Andrea,
Well, I was just going to tag on to that and say, I absolutely, when I speak on this topic, I have this big slide on, you need a team to avoid crisis and all that. So I'm in total agreement with that. And I think that the other thing that, because this is a call with a lot of family caregivers on it. So I think about it when I'm working with a family, and we've been working with them for a long time. Who in the family is best at doing what? So maybe one sibling's really good at dealing with the attorney and putting all the papers in place. And one person is really good at sort of being the liaison with the home care company, like with Christine or my company, just to sort of say, we don't like this person, we like this person. And, so I also, I sort of feel like you need a team, but your family, that's what the interesting part about all of this is that your family needs to become a team. And the family is not really that often work together as a team to be able to do this. And the entire family goes back into all their old roles as who they were as siblings. So that all comes out. So I sort of feel like families need to be ready to be coached a little bit to understand how they can be the most efficient. And, I might not be good at one thing, but really good at something else. So it's not, you don't have to worry about that. But I think it's really important for families, especially at the point when they're dealing with this, is to give themselves a little bit of a break and sort of just figure out the best person to do it. It's like running a company. Who's the best person to be, doing X, Y, and Z? Think about it as like that. And I think that kind of helps a little bit.
Yeah, that is probably one of the most common topics that comes up in our Daughterhood Circle meetings is the family dynamics, the sibling dynamics, particularly over, the sibling doesn't do anything, I do all of it. I mean, like the family dynamics is a huge part of it.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge.
And speaking of, I mean, I'm going to, I think the other seems like, especially related to home care, is that often tense conversation between your parent, the parent who's living alone and thinks that they've got everything under control and maybe are starting to have some deficits and, being able to care for themselves on a daily basis. They're not actually eating well, or they're, you can tell that their mobility issues are declining and that they could use some help. Maybe it's even worse than that. Or they're going home from the hospital and, as the caregiver, you're like, I really want to put some services in place. And then the parent is like, I don't need anybody. I don't want anybody. I don't like this person. I don't like that person. And I'm sure you deal with this all the time. This is like all the time. But what advice do you have for family caregivers who are trying to sort of, get their parents kind of what they need and sort of persuade them, to accept some help at home? Either one of you want to take that one on?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Andrea and I will probably have similar messages here, but I mean, I have a couple thoughts. Number one is sometimes it matters who delivers the message, right? So for example, we have some clients that are really, really good patients. They don't listen to anybody in their family, but they're good patients. And so if it comes from a doctor, right? If it comes from a doctor, if the advice comes from a doctor, then they might listen to their doctor, right? If it comes from a third party. So I think it matters who delivers that. Sometimes that's just part of the family dynamics, if it comes from one son or daughter, but they might not listen to it, but then another son or daughter says it, then all of a sudden it's
right.
like, yeah, it makes sense.
Right.
So sometimes it matters who delivers the message. So who in your family is going to deliver the message, right? The other thing too is even just starting in baby steps. And so you might feel like they need 8 hours a day, right, of assistance, but 8 hours a day is just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so sometimes you just need to start small and get what you can get. And so if instead of getting 8 hours a day, you might be able to talk them into like, hey, maybe, they're just going to come in for 3 hours. And I don't know. It could also be, the other thing that has worked a lot with a lot of our clients is that they are not getting a caregiver, quote unquote, a caregiver. What they're getting is like, they're getting a personal driver to drive them to their transport, to their doctor's appointments. They are going to get their own personal chef to cook their meals. They're not getting a caregiver to come into the house. So sometimes it's the title because they don't want to feel like they're losing that independence and that they need to be cared for. So it's a little bit of, we call it therapeutic lying sometimes, but it's just being creative on the titles that you are giving to these individuals that are coming in. So that way your family member still feels like they're in control, right? Because that's really the biggest thing is that, they have a sense
They have a
of
choice.
Yeah,
they have a choice.
Exactly. And sometimes you just need to drop it for a little bit.
Yeah. That's what I always say. It's a process. It's like, you can't just, like for those of us who are type A, which is probably a lot of people on this call, right? It's just like, okay, well, I'm going to start now. I'm going to get it done. And here we go. And it just doesn't work that way. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. It is a process. You drop it in. And the other thing that I've noticed, and I, of course, agree, as I always do with everything that Christine says, I think, in most families, there's like, you don't have that conversation, that goes in every part of your family. Like there's like just stuff you don't talk about. So this stuff is really hard to talk about because your family has never talked about this before. So like it's a good time to try to start saying, preface it with, I know this is a hard conversation. I imagine how hard it is for you to talk about this, but I just have to bring it up. And, and again, bring it up and then feel the tension and then drop it. Right. And then just keep doing it. So it becomes like a muscle where you can actually keep having the conversation so it's not awkward and weird, because you're doing something that you've never done before, which is basically parent a parent or parent a spouse or, whatever situation you're in. And it's hard.
So hard. It's so hard. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, here I am. I've sort of been studying this and working in this area for my whole life. And then every time I try to talk to my dad about any of this, I mean, he just shut me down over it. And I was like, wow, it just goes to show how, we can sit up here in our researchy policy world and be like, yeah, this is how you should do it. This is how you should have the conversation. And in practical reality, I was like,
right.
I was like, okay, I'm hitting this wall. So I want to pivot just a little bit because,
sorry, Anne, real quick.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to, there was something in the chat that I think came up that I think is really worth bringing up. And, so Margie wrote in the chat and she says, it's almost easier when they've had an injury or an event, they're more willing to accept help rather than when they are mobile and somewhat healthy. Right. And there's a lot of truth to that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think as sons, daughters, spouses, or as caregivers, family members, that very well might be true. But I think there's still things on our end, if we have concerns, that we can do to be proactive about it. So, because at the end of the day, this affects you, right? This affects you and your time and your life. So what can you do as a family caregiver to be kind of proactive about that? So for example, that if you're getting shut down, right, and you're not going anywhere, but you feel like there's a crisis that could happen, maybe they're already a fall risk and they're just one fall away from total devastation, then maybe you can start making the phone calls beforehand, even if they're not willing to accept help, but exactly who you're going to call. Right? It's kind of like having a car.
I love it.
Your car is on the verge of breaking down. You don't want to start until your car is completely immobile, right? It's not driving anymore to now start shopping. You're out of a car now. So what you have to do is, even if they're not willing to accept help, you at least have a phone number to call and it's already set up. And I suggest this to even a lot of people that are still just kind of in transition they haven't signed up for our service. And I'm just like, listen, but at least this is already set up. You already have our signed service agreement done. This is already done where, and we will do whatever we can to try to get you the help, within hours notice, because sometimes that's what happens. So just still be proactive without them trying to be sign on, because really it's all going to fall on your plate a lot of times anyway. So do what you can to not get yourself into crisis. The crisis will happen, but what can you do to try to get yourself out of that crisis? Does that make sense? I hope.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
It seems like a good home care provider I love what you're saying, Christine, because it's sort of I'm thinking about my own family. When my dad, he couldn't shower. And he would only let my mom shower. And I'm looking at one of the comments in the chat, my mom, also 82, is basically showering my dad and helping him transfer in and out of the bathroom. And but I knew that there was no way my dad was going to let anybody else do that as long as my mom was doing it. And I think that what I started to finally put together was I need to find the person who can do that when this all falls apart. And I thought, well, my mom shouldn't do this. We should have someone else do this. And that didn't work. I just had to let them do the thing that they were going to do together, but then be ready, like you said, Christine, for when it just got to the point where it wouldn't work anymore. And my father passed away before that happened, but my mom always feels like, well, she did her thing. Right. So,
Yeah. And the same could even be said about when we are caring for clients at home, the same could be said about assisted living too. Don't wait until you know that if you feel like they're not going to be able to stay in their home long term, you should also be proactive about looking for the communities. It's the same. All of it. There's, and I'm not trying to say that this is, because it's a lot of pressure on caregivers, on family caregivers, and it's already, you already have a lot on your plate. But the point is what can we do to try to avoid that crisis that just really, that's where so much burden comes in for caregivers. Yeah. And so what can we do to try to avoid that? And it's always just, and we just see it so often that caregivers are just kind of they deal with one crisis after another, and so what can we do about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I love this question we have. I feel like this topic probably, like, we're doing home care in 1 hour and there's so much to talk about, and just this one piece of it, which is, how do we integrate this person who's not part of our family into these most intimate, they're in our home, they're with vulnerable older adults, they're performing these really intimate tasks like bathing, helping with toileting, helping somebody get dressed, that relate so closely to dignity and all of how we think of ourselves in this world. And so we've got this great question in the chat that's, my mom is afraid. She's afraid somebody's going to come in, and what if, what if they are, what if they're dishonest, or what if they don't, what if they can't be trusted? I think it'd be great, for the folks on the call to hear from you all about sort of all of the safeguards that a good agency puts in place in order to make sure that the person who's in your home is well supervised, well trained. This is another huge topic because we have a workforce crisis going on at the same moment. But I think just that reassurance that there's lots of different ways you can get home care. So it becomes incredibly important to reassure your mom is to say, because we're going to go with an agency that we trust. It's not just the individual coming into the home. You have a relationship with an agency. So anyway, I'm giving away all the answers, but Christine, I feel strongly about this,
Yeah, well, so the comment was about fear, right? So her mom, Karen's mom, is afraid that a caregiver is going to come in, that they're going to go and help themselves to everything in her house and, steal things. And that's where, that is one of the biggest selling points to using, a professional home care agency versus hiring privately, is because that protection is there. So they are, employees of the home care agency. They're licensed, they're bonded, they're insured. There's workers' comp insurance on that. And that is, that's a humongous one. The rate of injury for caregivers is humongous. Workers' compensation is our biggest line item in terms of an expense for our home care agency. And the reason why is because of the cost of being able to manage a workers' comp claim. So by hiring a professional caregiving company, that is our expense. That's not yours, right? Same thing with bonding insurance, all of that. So, if in the case of the person that posted this, Karen that posted this, she's afraid. And so you really want to, her pain point is that she's afraid of somebody coming through the house. So you want to be able to talk to her about, these are, I hear you, you're afraid. Here is the reason. Here are some things that, let's just say a home care agency, this is all of the things that they offer that will alleviate some of those pain points. Yep. If anything does happen, right, we're protected. There's insurance against that. Those types of things, so you really want to focus on the security and all the different protections that are in place.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, that a lot of times families ask us to interview the caregiver before they actually come. And, we used to do that in person a lot. It's more over Zoom now, which is harder because a lot of these caregivers, it's hard for them in a Zoom environment to really kind of express who they are. But just kind of, sometimes we send a bio with people like of a caregiver, because you basically want to humanize the profession, right? We want people to understand that this person going into the home is doing it because they want to do it. They want to be there. They want to do the best job that they can. And, and that comes from when you're onboarding the case and trying to get, your parent to understand why it's a good thing to have someone there. But like, again, that's where, like Christine said, a good company, and you can ask about that. Do you show up if it's a complicated case? Do you show up the first day of service? How do you introduce the caregiver to my parents? Do you have a case manager that I can call? Who's my point person at the agency? Because again, it's sort of like, oftentimes we think that we put the best caregiver in there and it totally works. And other times we think we put the best caregiver in and it doesn't work, because sometimes it just doesn't work. So if it doesn't work, the match isn't good. You just got to be really fast at saying, okay, that doesn't work and let's try someone else. Because you don't want to erode that trust. You've started the process, and then if you put a person in that doesn't work, you want to make sure that you're trying. And because I always use myself as a test, and I say to myself, how would I feel if somebody did that to me? And then I change up everything that I'm doing, because it would really get me annoyed. If somebody came in because I couldn't do something and told me what I should have, it's just like there's an art to the delivery of care. It's a total art.
And this is the most personal. So not just the things that this worker, professional caregiver is doing, but just the way that they're now in the mix of your family at a moment that is very hard for your family. And so it's just, it's just, and as I'm looking at the comments coming in the chat, it just really, it's just illustrative of what I'm saying. And I do want to talk about money in the last, as part, some of the things we touched on in the last 15 minutes, because Linda asked a really good question. How do you talk about cost and finances? And especially to parents. And I think it's important to say, and then Lisa asked a really good question about how do you, as owner operators of these businesses, go through the process of vetting the professional caregivers, which I think is super, super important, and lots of other good suggestions here. And oh my gosh. And then Danielle has got, I hear she is caregiving for a spouse, which is
a whole nother, it's a whole different dynamic.
So hard. Thank you for coming to this discussion. And if there are pieces of this that we don't fully get into, and you want to continue the conversation, just reach out to me over the website, and we'll find a way to get your questions answered or to help you problem solve. So just on money, I'm going to say this: Medicare doesn't pay for this. Medicaid does, but in very limited circumstances. We'll sort of save that for another day. But a lot of what we are talking about is paid for privately, or in the rare case that you have a private long-term care insurance policy, but not that many people do. So this is paid for out of pocket, and it is expensive, as it should be, because we are hiring other people to come into our homes and do this really important work, and we want to value that. So, I think, like I always say, some home care is better than none if somebody needs it. And there are ways to sort of figure out what you can do and what you can afford. And I'm sure Christine and Andrea, you guys deal with this all the time. Not everybody can afford lots and lots and lots of care. So what are some strategies that you all use to help people manage the cost of all of this?
Do you want to start, Christine, or
yeah. I mean, so I don't even know whether or not to say it, because I think it's so controversial, but because I know how home care is so expensive. Home care is so expensive, but it's honestly not expensive enough. And I say that because I think if we truly paid, and I own a home care agency, and I think we treat our employees, and I think we pay better, and we offer benefits, we do all of that, but they're still not paid enough. At the end of the day, they're still not paid enough, right? And I know that, and so it kind of drives me crazy when I hear, you see article after article after article about caregivers and home care aides, just being low paid and all of this stuff, but then yet there's no national policy around. So it's really all on us as consumers to be able to pay for that cost, right? But yet these caregivers are not paid enough. So what if we did pay them what they were truly worth and what they should be getting paid? Could you imagine what the cost would be? right? And so sit with that, and that, I know I'm saying something terrible, is that, oh, it's, you're not paying enough for home care. And I say that in a way where I mean that as more of like that's just more of a social discussion about, like, how much we value, right, caregivers and what they bring to the table and all of that. I mean, it's an absolutely needed profession, but they're not paid enough, right? And so, anyways, that's a whole nother topic that we probably don't need to get into, but it's the truth. And so I'm saying that as a home care agency owner.
No, I think it's important to say that truth. Like, this is like, we have a huge crisis. We don't have enough workers. There's a supply and demand problem, and it has to do with the fact that we don't have, anyway, I will stay out of the policy discussion.
I know. I was like, that's a can of worms I probably shouldn't have opened.
We don't have this problem in other countries anyway. So we're kind of on our own. Andrea, your thoughts? Christine and I get going on this, and boy.
Well, I think, honestly, like, I think when it comes to paying, it's just, I think everybody, like, when you think about when I think about how much money am I going to need to sort of support my long-term care needs, which I don't really know, I kind of freeze up and my stomach hurts, right? So I think if as a family, like, there's two basic, you're either going to be, like, if you think about it, there's three boxes. The one box is you're going to pay privately for services that going to provide support to you or someone at home. The second is you're going to pay privately for services to support you in housing. And the third is you can go into a skilled nursing facility. We actually have a lot of clients who just want us, over and above in a skilled nursing facility, whether it's short or long-term care, simply because they want like one-on-one. So, I mean, I think it's about thinking about what your choices are and thinking about, talking to your family about it. And this is, again, where you're pulling at your family team and seeing, who's going to support this. If your parents don't have enough money, are family members willing to put in some money, or, because that's going to determine where you're going to be staying, because some people just aren't going to be able to support them, whether or not we can do it or not. Families may not be able to afford 24-hour care 7 days a week at home, and they might have to shift them into a long-term care facility. And you're going to want to know when that is. So it's not like you're going to have a roadmap, but you want to have just kind of a sense of, this is what we're going to do. And that's where a good elder law attorney might be able to help, or a good financial planner might be able to help, and as you think through long-term care issues. But I think having some level of plans or thoughts about it, and again, Christine said in the beginning about sort of home modification. I live in a house right now that has 4 levels, and I keep saying to my husband, we better do something fast, because we need to think about this, because otherwise we have to move. So it's just kind of like having those conversations, which are not easy conversations to have, especially with parents who just are there. It's really hard. But the one thing I just wanted to say before I forget, because I was thinking about it a while ago when we started the conversation here, was that I remember talking to one of my wisest friends. She's been a discharge planner at Mass General Hospital for so many years. We've been friends for 30 years. And how, like, you have those people who you're the wisest person in your life for certain functions. Well, she's the wisest person in my life about caring for older people and supporting families, except for you two, of course, Anne and she said to me, all of those people, like, you can't burden yourself as family members making that promise that you're never going to be, that
Right.
they're never going to move into a long-term care facility, because that's a false promise. You don't know that. So a lot of us struggle with, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I said I wouldn't. And, and hopefully you won't have to, but it is something that, like, we have to just rethink all of our assumptions about what we can and can't do. This is not an easy world to be living in right now. And, all of us, if you're spending enough time on this call right now, it means you really care. So, like, just take that in.
Yeah, I love it.
So
we have so many. So first of all, I love the vibrant chat that we're having. I am noticing 2 very different types of questions or comments coming in. There's a couple of you on the call who know a lot about public policy and a wide variety of different kinds of programs and Medicare Advantage. And so asking a lot of very sophisticated technical questions, and happy to address those. I think maybe, it's making me realize maybe we need to have a policy conversation over on the sort of research and consulting side of my life to help answer some of those questions. We're going to focus. Yeah, exactly. So staying away from some of these acronyms, we want to really focus on some of the practical aspects of this in the next 5 to 6 minutes that we have left. I think that curious, Christine, somebody has asked a question about sort of well, how much of the money that goes to the home care agency goes to the caregiver? And I just want to give you a huge shout out, because Christine actually took her financial statements into a Daughterhood Circle meeting and walked her Daughterhood Circle members line by. Am I right? Did you do this? I heard you did this.
Not to that level of detail, but but I did. I used, I did talk about some personal company stuff, but there is a benchmarking study that's used for the home care industry, and it's done by Home Care Pulse. And every year they put out a big study on, how much, just on finances, right? On what it costs, how much goes to caregivers, all of that. So, because I really wanted, when I made my controversial statement that home care is not expensive enough, because at the end of the day, the bottom line of actually what goes back to companies is so much smaller than what you would think. Because as caregivers, as consumers, everybody's just oh my gosh, it's so expensive. They just see, in San Diego, in my market, it's anywhere between $35 to $40 an hour is pretty average, right? So to pay that hourly, it's a huge expense, especially if there's multiple hours of care needed. So,
especially if you're providing benefits, you're providing training, you're providing all of the insurance, and all of those things have to go into that.
So to answer this very specific question, that was asked in the chat, is how much it actually goes to the caregiver. And I can tell you, and this is through home care companies across the country, on average, 65% goes back to the caregiver. And that also includes their wages. That includes, the cost, basically the cost of care. 65% goes to the cost of care. What I mean is caregiver wages, the cost for workers' comp insurance, the cost for, their payroll taxes. Right. So right off the bat, none of that is just straight up goes to the caregiver and the cost of care. Then you have 35% left, right, for a home care agency owner after that on average. So with that 35%, to run any type of business and to have backup caregivers, to have scheduling people, to have all of that in place, to have the structure in place, I would say, I can give you the average. In average home care agencies, it's roughly about 25%. That's what the Home Care Pulse benchmarking study showed. I think that's high, but 25% is pretty average for home care companies. So now you're left with 10%, right, for a home care agency. And that is before a home care agency owner has paid themselves. So the average home care agency, at the end of the day, after paying their bills, before paying themselves, is left with 10%. So that agency owner still needs to get paid. Obviously it's a business, right? So I think for any, business 101 is to think okay, that's not a lot is my point. And again, this is with wages, what they are, right? So I hope that makes sense. And so, when I say things it's really not expensive enough, I'm talking about paying caregivers what they're paid, but also as business owners, their home care is overwhelmingly, it's one of the industries that has a lot of female women business owners. And so as a woman business owner, I feel really strongly about we should be paid what we're worth, right? We talk about it, it's all over. And so anyways, that's my own little soapbox. I probably don't need to go on right now, but that's, I hope Karen, that satisfies the details of your question.
And I just want to add to that quickly, because I know we're almost out of time, is that that's why it's also the other thing that home care, the industry and home care companies and people like Christine and I are trying to do is really elevate the profession of paid caregivers. Like how do we make it a better profession? I'm spending a tremendous amount of time on trying to do that so people want to work for us, so there won't be as much turnover, so we can provide all the families with better care. So, we're businesses, but we're also really at the point now where, and I've been doing this for a really long time, and I'm, part of me, it's hard as a business owner, but I'm so grateful that we finally have the opportunity to provide the level of training and support and supervision and admiration that we do for these direct care workers. So from an advocacy perspective, I think it's really huge what the industry is trying to do and will continue to try to do, because we have to, and it's going to impact our outcomes. You're going to get better care for it. We're going to figure out, technology is going to help us figure out better and more efficient ways to deliver care. So maybe we can drive the cost sideways a little bit so you can get more care, or, you can use some technology that's going to be able to provide some level of support if you can't afford 24/7. Like that's the other thing that we are trying to do, because we realize that we can't sort of cheap out on the caregivers. We don't want to. Right. So how do we help you get what you need, but how do we get not only what we need as business people, but more what do the caregivers need to stay in the industry and not go somewhere else?
Yeah.
So we're already short. I mean, there's already a shortage, right? We're already short. And so we really, as a country, really cannot afford to lose people.
Right. And we won't. We're not gonna. Yeah. We're not gonna.
On it.
Yeah, so, I'm on it. Not to worry.
So I recognize we're at the top of the hour, and we've had a lot of. This is so. It's hard to follow and keep track of all of the things in the chat, and just so appreciate it. And for those of you who have to drop at the top of the hour, please feel free to drop. I think the one thing we didn't get to that is so important is sort of how to vet and pick an agency. And we didn't really get into sort of, that versus going through one of the registries that where you're kind of like Match.com type thing. And so it may be that what we can do is maybe like just take 2 more minutes, and Christine, just 2 minutes to just tell everybody how to pick is there, we don't have good resources. Let me just say this. There's no, other than Daughterhood and a few other wonderful places, it's very hard to find a place to go where you can get together with people you really trust and say, all right, which are the good home care agencies? Like, where do I even start? I mean, there's I think I counted 40 different private home care agencies just in my market. Like, where would I even know where to start? So there's that problem. And then let's say I get it to 3, how do I assess which one's going to be the right fit for me? And so I'm maybe just a couple minutes to riff on those 2 things. And then we can follow up in an email I can put together a list of some more concrete recommendations for everybody on the call.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's 179 in the San Diego market. I mean,
Right.
It's so many. So, I mean, I guess there's so many ways to answer this question. So I guess I will say just in a very quick, and that's the reason why it's so important to be, who is in your network, either family members, who is in your network that has been through this experience before that can really recommend somebody, because it's very much about trust, right? And caring for somebody. So you really, if you're in San Diego and you have 179 agencies to choose from, that's crazy talk. How do you vet through all of that? And so, again, so many ways to answer this, but so I guess I will just very quickly just say, it's good just to be able to who can refer to you, who do you know that has been through this, that can just really just narrow this down, that had a really, really good experience with an agency, and have a lot of others, but that's process of time. We don't have that much time to talk about all of it. So Andrea, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I just have a couple of basic questions that I tell people to just kind of ask. And I'll tell you what those questions are, but also when you're listening to the response, listen to how they respond. Don't just listen to the response, because, you got to like the person that you're dealing with. And if, they're short, we do a lot of, competitive shopping, and, you call your competitors and pretend you're and it's like you get off the phone and you're just like, whoa, I would never use that because of the way the person answered the phone, right? But anyway, so some of the things that we ask are, how long have you been in business? How many, and that's just like, you just kind of want to get a sense of that. What's your response time? If I need someone, like, how fast can you actually provide someone there? Do you do home visits? How do you supervise your workers? If you could ask any of these questions, just see if they have an answer. It's like almost not the answer as much as it is, do they have an answer? Do you accept long-term care insurance policy? What do your hourly rates cover? How do you charge? How do you bill? And tell us how you vet your workers. All of those questions. We just started paying workers weekly, the caregivers weekly, and that was a big deal. Like, what are the special things you do for your caregivers to make them feel special? Anything that you want, anything that you're interested in, and the answer will just help inform your decision. I promise you that. And it's the person, you get a live person at the other end of the phone when you call. Christine, don't you think that makes a huge difference? I mean, if you're going to get a voicemail, people are going to go right on to the next company, and you should, because you want to be talking to a person.
Right. So. Yeah. So, like, for example, at our company, once they become a client, we have a new phone number. It's a dedicated client line, and that phone number is answered 24 hours a day. So those are definitely types of things that you want to address.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have 180 more too.
I know.
We're getting some comments in the chat that, like, everybody was kind of waiting for this moment in the call, and then we crammed it into this last 5 minutes. I feel really bad about that.
Hey, Ann, do you would you want to? I mean, like, if anybody wants to stay on, just to be able to address some of these questions,
in the chat, absolutely,
or just to, and then, but anybody can drop off if they want to. But I feel like
if you have time. I have time, and I would definitely welcome that, because I think it sounds like this. We hit on it, and maybe another 5 minutes or so, or 10 would help.
So I think, Christine, go for it. A lot of these questions that are coming up are things that come up in Daughterhood circles and during Daughterhood circle meetings. So I think that if you are, go to the Daughterhood website, see if there is a circle near you. If there is not one, pretty much all of, what's the closest one to you? Otherwise, in San Diego, we're always welcome to have you. I know the Bay Area has there's several Daughterhood circles that are pretty robust and pretty active. Like Jean Ross's, I don't know if she's still in here, but her circle, the Bay Area circle is also really active. And so if there isn't one in your area, try to join, get with Ann and Susan, and they will kind of tell you, they'll do some coaching on which ones to join. For Zoom calls, and then hopefully that will help. But one of the and Barrett, I don't know if you're still here. Yes, you are. But she asked, or she asked the question about, could you please discuss the subject of compensation for a family member providing home care in my home? Right. So that's a big one. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that is, at least, and I don't know what state you're in, but, like, for example, in the state of California, we have in-home supportive services for individuals that are considered low income or on Medi-Cal, that qualify for Medi-Cal. They can qualify for in-home supportive services. And at least in California, in-home supportive services can be paid to a family member. That's not the case for all states. So that's one part of the question. The second part of that question, the way that I would answer that is also, I would really recommend, if any family member is going to be paid, then, you really should get some sort of contract in place, actually pay the money to get like talk to an attorney. I can recommend some that kind of specializes in, in that type of thing, but there should be a contract in place.
I agree.
Yep.
And we can also, and we can put together the list of the vetting questions like that. That's easy because we already have that. So we can absolutely do that. And we can put together tips for sort of the accepting the services, anything that you can use to basically start the conversation. You know what I mean? Anything. Because I think, one of the big takeaways from this that Christine talked about earlier was that, anything that you can do before a crisis occurs is the best. But the other thing I just have to say to everybody on this call is that I have been working sometimes with families that are really, really complicated, where you know that there's really nothing that you can do until something happens. And it's really hard for a family member or a concerned family member or a person who's running a business like ours to be able to accept that, because you never stop trying. So it's not that you're stopping to try, it's just that you're keeping a really close eye, and you just have to, allow it to happen and then fix it.
Yeah.
Because again, so much about being a family member is that you're beating yourself up over and over and over again. I should have, I could have, I would have, I can't, and it's just, allow yourself to sit in that, but then you just have to know, you also have to know that you're doing everything that you can, and sometimes you just can't fix everything.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys talk about that in those daughterhood circles. I can't even imagine that doesn't come up over and over again. But I have so much incredible respect for family members and everything that they do. And then, and how much they, and how much some families get so much joy from it after, they realize, it's just like you're in it and you're just not even thinking, but, it's sometimes a gift to be able to, and a lot of times it's with a difficult relationship that you're having to do it with, but it's important. It's like a circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think that what we always try, I would almost say Daughterhood was always founded. And by the way, I didn't introduce myself. So I founded Daughterhood. My name is Ann Tomlinson. Hello, everyone. I realized I just launched into this. And I also have a research and consulting firm, which I've mentioned in the chat to a couple of you because you're asking research and consulting questions. And that's at atiadvisory.com. And there's a lot of stuff over there about SNPs and MA and all those acronyms if you're interested in that. But I would just say we started Daughterhood because what we wanted people to understand is that they aren't failing. There is a systemic failure. You can't, I think as Americans, we tend to assume that we have this individual superpower that we should be able to overcome and solve all problems if we're just smart enough or skinny enough. I don't know, rich enough. But there are things about the way we've organized all of these services, in part just sort of historically, because we haven't had people living until they're 95 on average or whatever, or 82 on average. So we're just a little bit behind kind of catching all that up. And that's why many of you are experiencing so much friction and so much pain and a lot of suffering, is because you're coming up against something that is kind of an immovable object. And so as Andrea said, you're doing the best you can. And home care is just part of the puzzle. It's just a piece in the puzzle, which is why we're talking about it today. And I think I've gotten so many good comments in the chat. And I think a couple of you want to know, we can definitely put together a list of questions. I think probably what I need to do is write a blog that just kind of goes over this conversation and some of the things that we talked about so that it's in writing. I think since it's recorded, I betcha that won't be too hard. So that you all have it and we can send it around and things like that. I should probably wrap up because I have another call I'm supposed to be on now. But
yeah,
I really, really appreciate Andrea and Christine. You guys are this was thank you. I just can't even. There are no words for how helpful this was. Thank you so much.
I haven't met Andrea in person, but just from what I've gotten from Ann about her, and then what I know about her business, I'm kind of, I'm a super fan. I'm a fangirl now, and
oh, stop it!
I just want to be Ann, or I just want to be Andrea.
Andrea, we all want to be Andrea. No, I wanted to be Andrea 6 years ago. Yeah.
No. I just, I love this. I mean, we can end, but I just have to tell you, I just feel like I feel really lucky to be able to do what we do. And I love being around people that actually care about doing it. And I'm having a really good time trying to figure out ways to, these caregivers. I used to tell people the favorite people in my company were the caregivers. They're just such cool people. So you got to trust them, and you got to trust and know that they will go in there and do the best that they can, because they're just really cool, interesting people.
Yeah. And
it's sort of hard to explain that, but I have to tell you. So I just feel lucky to be able to be a part of this profession.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. You guys are superstars. So thank you so much. And thank you to this incredible audience with all these great, interesting and hard questions and challenging questions. So we'll be in touch with some follow-up and look for the next conversation, and welcome any and all feedback through the website. If you want more Andrea and Christine, we can also arrange that. So all right, thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.